All right. Let me know when you guys can hear me, both in the Moore's Laws Dead Discord if you're a patron and in the live chat, and then we will get started. Make this a little smaller. Yes, I'm sorry. I am a little late. No one saying they can hear me yet, though. Okay. All right, I know there's always a delay on the internet, but I'm seeing people say that the mic sounds good now, so I think we're going to get started. All right, welcome to the technically end of May loose ends. It's usually within the first half of a month or at the very end of a month, and this one it's right at the halfway point because I took a vacation last week, and so that pushed this back a little bit. But I'm here now. It's time to get started. For those who haven't listened to one of these or watched one of these live streams before, I, especially lately, usually have few leaks, a few updates on the latest stories to go through. And I just start rolling through the Moore's Law's Dead patron submitted questions, which of course can submit for free if you support Moore's Law's Dead on Patreon, and then also the tipped questions as well. So I just go through them as makes sense as quickly as possible. If you have a question for me, throw it in the live chat. If it's a tipped question, I'll be much more likely to notice it. And yeah, I guess let's stop wasting time. Then let me put down a timestamp here because I actually have a few leaks. So first of all, let's talk about the R5 5600 X3D. While I was on break, I saw some rumors that it might come out, that it was out there. And while I was putting together the notes, both for the upcoming Broken Silicon and also for this loose ends, I, as you would expect, reached out to some of my contacts. And the feedback I got at first was, seems like it's probably real, but we're not sure. But over time, I got from one of my best sources that this was real. The 5600 X3D is indeed real, although at least right now I am told that this Zen 3 V-Cache chip with just 6 cores seems to be intended for OEMs. Now, the upcoming Broken Silicon is going to be quite a large episode. I should have more feedback from more sources by the time that comes out early next week. But up until right now, it sounds like, yes, the 5600 X3D is real, but it's mostly for OEMs. And in fact, when I check Amazon right now at the 5800 X3D, that thing's selling for $290 with 8 cores. And so if already they're selling the 8-core version for under 300, it does make me wonder, well, what would they even price the 6-core version at? 200, 230? I don't know. It makes me call into question just a little bit how much this would indeed be for the do-it-yourself market. Now, of course, eventually that means you'll still, I'm sure, be able to buy it on Newegg and on Amazon. But again, it kind of reminds me of like the early, like I think it was either Renoir or Cezanne launches to AM4, where at first those APUs were pretty much just for OEMs. You had to go to weird websites to order them, and over time they launched to do it yourself. So that's what I can report right now. They are definitely testing the 5600 X3D. It is out there, but it seems to be meant for OEMs to have a good, cheaper AMD offering against the budget Raptor Lake i5s, which are really Alder Lake rebrands when I say the budget i5s, because those are these 6 big core, no E-core variants. This is what this is meant for, to just get rid of the remaining, honestly, also probably to get rid of the remaining AM4 motherboards OEMs have right now, and have some attractive offering. So at least that's what I am hearing. And then in terms of leaks, let me now switch gears from AMD to Intel. Put down a timestamp for this one as well. You can keep those tipped questions coming if you have them. I'll get to them very soon. I'm just kind of putting them off to the side really quick while I get through these leaks. So Raptor Lake refresh. Video cards reported on the, a branding picture that I've also seen other people behind the scenes have, which is, the Core 7, Core 5, and Core, 9, and then Ultra 5, Ultra 7, Ultra 9. And really, guys, what this all comes down to is finally people are on board with something I leaked 1 or 2 months ago, that the entire point of Meteor Lake Ultra branding is to differentiate between Raptor Lake Refresh and Meteor Lake products that are going to launch at the same time to mobile with the same core counts, but not with that different performance, right? if you think about it, Raptor Lake Refresh is going to, in a lot of metrics, be very similar to Meteor Lake. The difference is Meteor Lake is going to use substantially less energy, have new AI capabilities and some performance benefits in other scenarios. And so they're fairly similar. Intel wasn't sure what to do with that. And, that's where the Ultra comes from. And also, they see this as an opportunity to get rid of the I branding and try to kind of move forward into a new era where at least Intel's hoping they will be directly competitive with AMD. Seems like they're finally admitting to themselves they really weren't for a few years straight. So that's what's going on. And so, yeah, I can confirm again what other people are saying that Raptor Lake Refresh coming to desktop is 14th gen. And actually, this really isn't new either, but I got more feedback today. Yeah, definitely launching quarter 3. In fact, I'm told Raptor Lake Refresh for desktop is already in production and it will definitely be out within probably a few months. So that's what you'll see launched to desktop, which will be 10 to 20% better than existing Raptor Lake. And instead of an i9, I guess they'll call it a Core 9 14900K. And to be honest, when I think about a Core 9 14900K that is 10 to 20% better than the i9 14900KS, yeah, that should easily finally take the multi-threading crown on desktop against AMD. Well, more comfortably disputing who holds the gaming crown. I know Intel would argue right now that the gaming crown is disputed, but if you have a brain, it really isn't disputed. AMD has the gaming crown. You can split hairs about which chip can do gaming and multi-threading at the same time if you're willing to buy $300 RAM kits, but ultimately AMD on average has better gaming performance right now. But if they can boost it another 10% or even another 5% in single threading and then boost multi-threading another 20%, then I think Intel can argue we have something that offers the same gaming performance, better multi-threading, and drops into existing sockets. So I think that'll be a little more interesting than people were expecting, as I've been reporting for a while now. Although, honestly, it's probably going to use like 350 watts. So, I don't know how exciting it really is, but it is interesting to think that if you got like a Alder Lake i5, which I heavily recommended, I thought the i5 12600K was a fantastic product. Now you can upgrade to a Raptor Lake Refresh chip that offers, I mean, how much more performance? Because it's another 20% over Raptor Lake in some scenarios. So that should probably be exciting for some Alder Lake owners, though. I'd say that's really the people probably most excited about Raptor Lake Refresh, or who should be most excited. Um, all right. And then after Core 9, let me put down one more timestamp here for another update. Remember to hit the like button, people. We got almost 400 people watching. I would hope we have at least 400 likes. But now we have over 400 people watching. A lot of people are joining still. The final thing I wanted to say that is kind of in the department of new information is Navi 32. So, yeah, that picture was shown by Forbes in the background from B-roll from AMD. I think a lot of people would go, AMD accidentally leaked Navi 32. It's never an accident, guys. I'm sure AMD sent Forbes that B-roll for the video and was like, make sure you show this so people start talking about Navi 32 in the background. So, yeah, I don't to this day actually though really have, I mean, let me just make sure no one sent me a message. Yep. All right. Oh, so someone is. Yeah. So, okay. So when it comes to Navi 32, which, we now have finally pictures of, what I'm being told is that it should also launch quarter 3. And this is all coming from the fact that Navi 21 seems to be mostly sold through. That's your 6800, 6800 XT, 6900 XT, 6950 XT, those products. AMD is mostly through the oversupply of that. And then they're doing pretty well with the Navi 22 oversupply. I actually still hear that Navi 23, 6600, 6650, 6600 XTs, that those still have a ton of volume just sitting around. And, that's why you see the 6600 at $180, as I reported over the past week as well. I think you're going to keep seeing the RX 6600 below 200, the 6600 XT gravitate towards 200, and the 6650 XT below 250 for a while, because of all of the dies AMD made, and none of them were overproduced like Ampere, besides 23. I've had it suggested to me by multiple people that Navi 23 kind of has ampere levels of volume. Now, keep in mind what that means, though. That's one out of their 4 dies. Nvidia overproduced all of them. So that's why, we don't need to regurgitate that whole conversation. But all that is to say that you're going to probably have cheap Navi 23 products for a very long time. And AMD hasn't felt pressured to release. I mean, they almost didn't release the 7600 to be like that thing was sitting around for months until they finally released it. And the Navi 32 launching quarter three. Again, let me say it again. I can report it's launching probably quarter three. The reason it's taking so long to come out is it doesn't make any sense to launch until AMD's done with the 22 and 21 oversupply. Because guys, look, it's not really going to offer any new it's not going to offer any new performance over the previous generation. So it doesn't make sense to launch until you're done selling through the previous generation. And I would expect the 7800 XT, as I speculated and I think leaked a very long time ago, to probably be the bottom yields of Navi 31 with 16 gigabytes. And then below that, you'll have the 7700 XT with Navi 32, the 7700 or whatever they decide to call that. And those are just going to be more efficient versions of what you can buy right now, really, right? The street price of I think the 6950 XT is going for 600. So I'd expect the 7800 XT to be 600 to 650 with slightly better ray tracing, better efficiency, and that's what it's going to do. But remember, these products that it's replacing are already well below what their MSRP was. Like the 6700 XT is like 350. So if the 7700 XT comes out and it's like a RX 6800 for 450 with less power usage, better ray tracing, just keep in mind the 6800 at 450 is 1 to like 30% below MSRP. So that's why it's taking so long to come out, because when you don't offer new levels of performance, it really is just a better version of discount products out right now, or that's how it's supposed to work, right? If you're Nvidia, you just charge more for the same performance gen over gen, I guess, and then no one buys it. But yeah, that's what you should expect. So again, recapping the new leaks today. 5600X 3D exists. That's 6 core. Seems like it's mostly for OEMs at first, though. And then Raptor Lake refresh quarter three. It's basically ready. I mean, they're producing it right now. That is going to be the Core 9 14900K, probably launching in a few months. And then also launching this summer slash late summer, Navi 32, slotting in once Navi 22 and Navi 21 sales are just sold through. So, yep, that's my new information today. And now it is time to get to the questions. But before I do that, this live stream is brought to you by Micro Center. Micro Center is opening up a new store in Indianapolis, the first new store in 8 years, bringing the total to 25 nationwide. By signing up and visiting the Indianapolis store, you can receive a 128 gigabyte flash drive for free. You do need to go there to get it, but if you do, even if you're an existing Micro Center customer who's shopped with them for years, for visiting in the new store, they will just give you a free flash drive. And if you are a new customer, there's a link in the description. They are running this new deal that they've done occasionally in the past for Moore's Law is Dead. If you are a new customer to Micro Center, you can get a 256 gigabyte SSD for free. That's it. Just go to there. They'll give you free SSD for going to a Micro Center for the first time. And also, they're doing a bunch of laptop deals this month. My last video that came out looking at AMD's data center stuff had a special deal on an Asus laptop. The link in the description today has a link to a $200 off Katana 15 MSI gaming laptop as well. And just remember, if you're watching this, you're supporting Moore's Law is Dead if you click the links in the description. So please click the links in the description and look at their offers as well. I mean, I really can't recommend Micro Center enough. They're a sponsor that once I got about a year ago, I was like, finally, this is someone I truly can just recommend more than anybody else when it comes to buying PC hardware. And it now really is a great time to buy and do a new build. I'll get to that in some of the reader mails in a second. I think now is honestly pretty much back to normal. So if you've been waiting to do a build, you've got many products that are half off what they were a year ago and bundles that are ridiculous. So again, thanks Micro Center for supporting this piece of content, and check out the links in the description. And now let me make sure I'm not missing any tipped questions here. Okay, cool, YouTube. I don't know why you're being weird. All right, so no tipped questions yet. So I'm gonna start going through the patron questions right now. Let me see. All right, so let me get to yeah. All right. Let me put timestamp here and actually move this over a little bit so I can actually read it. 15, 17. Okay, so Florida Man writes in, just like you guys can if you support Moore's Law Z on Patreon. He asks, do you think a 5600X 3D would have similar performance to a 5800X 3D, or will it be more like the 7900X 3D to 7800, where there is a notable decrease in performance? I mean, look, it's going to depend on the game, but I'm going to assume 5600 to 5800 X3D is going to be much closer than 7900 X3D to like 7950 or 7800 X3D. You have no issues with the scheduling, with the apps choosing the right cores. They're all X3D cores. And actually, I believe the 5600 X3D should have the same amount of not cache, but V cache, the X 5800 X3D does. So any of those applications where the Vcache models of AMD CPUs gets like a 50% performance increase or something absolutely insane, like Factorio or Microsoft Flight Simulator, that's one where the 5600 X3D is probably going to look like the greatest deal in CPU history. But then, a lot of games use at least 8 cores now. So there will be games where it falls a little below that. That's what I think makes this product so hard to price. I mean, the 5800X 3D is $290. I mean, how do you price this? Do you put it at 250? Do you because I mean, there's going to be some games where it's the same performance and beats Zen 4, but there's also going to be a lot of games where it loses to budget Zen 4. So, I don't know. It's a hard one to price, and I do truly think it's mostly for OEMs at first, so they have an offering to entice customers to get rid of AM4 motherboards at like HP. Like honestly, that's what I think this is mostly for. They can market it as a Vcache budget gaming model, and then that just gets rid of those. All right, let me move on to but I expect, of course, a performance drop off, but I don't think it's going to be like the 7900X 3D, where I just don't think AMD should have launched the 7900X 3D. I really don't. Let me see here. All right, so Dr. Forbin writes in and asks, let me see here, versus 79. This year's had so many bad launches. Why are GPU makers so out of touch with mainstream gamers? A $500 GPU with enough bandwidth and enough VRAM would satisfy many of us. Well, I mean, yeah, when I talk to people at AMD and Nvidia, it's really a mixed amount of responses. Let's start with Nvidia first. A lot of Nvidia contacts um, honestly think that they were a little. They admit it. They were a little too used to shortage pricing with like the 4080. I've heard people say that. And they think the 4080 12 GB, they're like, yeah, we realize how silly that sounded. We were probably still a little drunk on the prices we were used to over the pandemic. But, you know, I think actually some of the Nvidia people think they were aggressive with the 4070 and 4060 Ti, and they kind of think the 4060 is a complete winner. I think what they're gonna find though is and this is something I've said before, every tier you go down a GPU in the GPU product stack, you just need substantially better price performance to be at all remotely interesting. And like you've at least got to be somewhat competitive with existing street prices of the previous gen while offering new features. And the 4060 Ti really doesn't do that. And it has not enough. And the same with the 4070, the amount of RAM it has is just a major concern that I think came out of left field for them. And so, being better price performance technically on paper compared to the 4090 by like 5 to 10%, I think they misjudged how interesting that would be. They thought, well, the 4080 kind of has worse price performance than the 4090, but the 4090 sold well. So if we just beat 4090 price performance down here, people will buy it, right? And I think they found no, not if you're not giving people more VRAM that we actually need right now. Now, as for AMD's launches, you know, a couple, some big YouTubers gave it bad reviews, but I don't know. The 7600 got pretty standard reviews. Some websites liked it a lot. And from what I keep hearing, it's selling okay. It's selling actually better than AMD expected. Is it selling fantastic? No, but I don't think any 8 gigabyte card is going to sell fantastic in this year. Like, it doesn't matter what you price it at. Like, it's literally a matter of like, I'm trying to think of like an analogy to make here. Like, it's a product where it's been around for so long, 8 gigabyte cards with that level of performance, that even if it offers okay or even good price performance compared to stuff out there, no one is looking for that, right? You know what I mean? Like, nobody is saying, "Oh, thank God, a new 8 gigabyte card that games well in 1080p." Nobody. That the people who exist that are looking for that is almost zero, So I just think that at the end of the day, though, that was never going to be a big seller. And when it comes to Dr. Foreman's question about, a 500, USD GPU with enough bandwidth and VRAM, guys, it's out. It's called the 6800 XT. Like, I just don't know what's I don't like, if you want that, it exists. It's already out. It's 30-40% cheaper than its MSRP was, and during the shortages it costs more. Like, let me even check what we're looking for now. And there's a reason RDNA 2 is selling out. It's because a lot of people have realized, this is what I was waiting for. It's just last gen, whatever. Yeah, it's like $500 and it comes with Resident Evil 4, a 6800 XT. There you go. I mean, if you want that game, it's practically 450. So, again, I think it's there. It's last gen. AMD's liquidating it at well below MSRP. And once it sells out, they'll replace it with a more efficient version that's RDNA 3. But that's about it. And that's, I have a link in the description. I really do encourage everybody to check this out. There is a link in the description um, to an HD 7770 review. This was a budget 1080p card AMD launched for a little more money than last gen cards that were a little stronger, and it got good reviews. This is how things used to work. AMD launches something for about the price of the street price of last gen cards. Those last gen cards are those selling below MSRP because they've been out for years, and because it's more efficient and has new features, that's considered par for the course. Go look up HD 7000 series reviews, the good old days. That is how GCN worked, that everyone says was great. They launched cards competitive with the street price of last gen, which was below MSRP, but they were more efficient, and that's what you would expect out of a new generation. I just think that's worth remembering here when we look at stuff, is that that's kind of how things used to work, actually, and we're kind of getting back to it. It's not to say things are excellent, and I think with how drawn out the shortages were, that and how big of a slap in the face some of the recent launches were, like the 4070 Ti, you've got a lot of people going that just want better and better. But I don't know, guys. We're kind of getting there. If you want a $500 4K card, it exists. It's just a last gen card that used to cost 700. John K writes in and asks, 7600 X3D, maybe using unused dies from the 7900 X3D. Yeah, I just don't see it. Maybe they'll launch it, but I don't know if there's really a point right away. Like, who's that really for? A budget 7600 X3D that costs more money because it uses V-Cache but doesn't use DDR4. I can kind of see the argument for the 5600 X3D because it allows AMD to get people to buy a bunch of budget AM4 motherboards so they can clear out that stock. But for the 7600 X3D, I don't know. I think I just keep selling the 7800 X3D and use any of those yields for Epic. At least that's my opinion, John K. But thank you for writing in. And thank you for the tip. All right, let's see here. 7600 X3D. I'll put that as a timestamp. And then also, yeah, let's put a new timestamp for this one here. Zen 4C versus E-cores. All right. Chris Rich writes in and he asks, now that Bergamo and Zen 4C are finally out in detail by AMD from their data center event, how would you rate it against Intel's P and E-core approach? Does it change your expectations for Strix Point at all? Well, let's answer that question first, Chris. Are my expectations for Strix Point changing at all? No. Remember, guys, a year ago, I leaked in my Sienna leak that Zen 4C had the same IPC as Zen 4. So this isn't news to me. This is something that's been covered by this channel for a long time because I knew that this whole time when I did my Strix leak, and I knew that 8 of the 12 Strix cores are Zen 5C. I'm also expecting the IPC is the same. So I don't think it's improper at all to just, if you want to save time and save your breath, to just say Strix Point has 12 cores. Yes, some of them are C cores, but they have the same IPC and hyperthreading, just like the big cores. So really all that's happening is 4 of the cores will probably boost to like 5.5 gigahertz, and 8 of the cores will boost to 3.5 to 4.5 gigahertz, but it's an APU. It's thermally constrained. Most of the time, laptop chips are only boosting a couple of the cores high, while the others are around 3 to 4 gigahertz anyway. So, no, none of my expectations change. I think Strix Point is an optimized, really enticing design that I'm looking for in a next gen laptop. And, when it comes to the whole P core versus E core approach, I just let's see Strix Point versus Meteor Lake, right? Let's see what 6 big and 8 little Meteor Lake cores do against 4 big and 8 kind of also still big cores from AMD next year. Because that'll be a true judge, right? That's where we're gonna have, okay, well, this one costs this much, this one costs a similar amount. They're both from a similar generation. Is it better? Because otherwise, right now, I don't know. I mean, yeah, Bergamo destroys Sapphire Rapids, but it's a complicated comparison. I am tempted to say that I think the C core approach is the overall better choice in a financial war of attrition because it's far cheaper than having 2 separate core roadmaps, like the Monts, Gracemont, Crestmont, the little cores. You have whole design teams designing that over here. Then you have people designing the main big architecture for Intel over there. And then you've got a hard design team putting them together. That's way more expensive than just taking a fork of every Zen architecture and then removing cache and redesigning the cache hierarchy a little bit so it works well, and making it a little more dense by putting things closer together for lower clock speeds. So it's just, it costs way less money to kind of do a similar thing. But then again, Intel's doing what they're doing for a reason. They have this core design for big cores that's bloated, so they kind of have to have a separate design to fit it. So I can see why both companies are doing what they're doing. And I think the C core option has a lot less room for software issues and it costs less to implement. But until we really, really get Meteor Lake versus Strix Point, it's hard for me to say one's better because we need that apples to apples comparison. But yeah, obviously one of them costs a lot less though, which is AMD's option. But AMD has less money. Kind of. It's changing, so it makes sense why they went that direction years ago and they came up with this plan. All right, so this moves well into another question here from QH Freddy. QH Freddy asks, "What do you think of Intel's rebranding of their desktop parts?" Um, it's hard for me to say when would the perfect time have been because I think really QH Freddy, you're asking two different questions. You're asking, do I like the new name? And also, do I think it's a good idea they're coming up with a new name? Right? Is it time? I mean, I don't know. They're on 14th gen. The names are long and bloated. Yeah, I think it's a pretty I think it's overdue that they come up with a new name here. But I do personally think the perfect time would have been Alder Lake. I think. Like, that's when they should have done it. But, there's a lot of things I would have done differently than what Intel's done. Like, I would have saved the i9 probably for Alder Lake. Like, that's when you introduce i9, and that's when you get rid of I. Like, that's when you do Core 9, 12900K. The first time we're using little cores, the first time we're bringing a giant IPC in. Well, I guess you could argue iSight had a big IPC increase, but an appreciably big clock speed and IPC increase at the same time on desktop. You know, I think that would have been the right time to do it personally, but Meteor Lake's not the worst time to do it. I mean, they're finally moving to this new tiled architecture in a mainstream generation for mainstream customers. So it's probably a decent time to do it. And if you go back and watch some of my older videos on Meteor Lake, I alluded that a lot of my Intel sources were telling me Meteor Lake is the start of the next gen of Intel. I was saying that in videos 2, 3 years ago. So I think this was always going to be one of those inception points, just like Alder Lake, anyways. And I think now's a decent time to do it. So that's part of your question, QH Freddy. What do I think about them saying Core Ultra and Core 9? I don't know. I I personally would have removed the core. I would have kept the I and removed the core. I would have said, this is an i9 14900K, and then this is a U9, 14750, H or whatever they're going to call it on laptop. I think that's what I would have done. Because I don't think the I is the issue so much as the core, like Core 2, Core Quad, Core Extreme, the Core series. Really, if you're thinking about it, if you're evolving into a new generation, get rid of saying core all the time. Like that feels much older than I. Core 2 Duo, that's way older than I. So if I was Intel, I would have said you have your i9s and then you have your Ultra 9s. And, I would have gotten rid of Core. That's what I would have done because Core is really a generic name too. It's like Core, like a core, like a VIA core, like an ARM core. Like, I don't know. That's my opinion on the branding. I think it's the right time to do it. I kinda get what they're trying to do. It still feels a bit clumsy to me, and I think I would have gotten rid of Core before I got rid of I. 'Cause I still think, like, i7 sounds good. Like, i7. Now you say Core 7? Sounds more generic, if you ask me. I don't know, that's just my opinion, but that's what I guess they're deciding to do. I don't agree with everything Intel does, that's for sure. Um, all right, I have some tipped questions here. Let me make sure I don't miss those. Remember to get those questions in now. Let me see. I answered that one. All right, let's see here. Um, Someone says in all caps, "Is AMD which, dude, you sent me a tip. You don't need to make it all caps, but he says, "Is AMD going to increase PCIe lanes on Ryzen 9 or 7?" Um, I think you could see some slight ones next gen, but it doesn't really sound like they're doing a big increase, like another 4 at most, if not none. So, and in fact, I already leaked a roadmap that showed 28 PCIe lanes. So the most likely answer is no, they're not. You know, at least not on for consumers, which some of you might go, that's disappointing. Other people might point out, yeah, it probably means they're going to try to keep next gen motherboards the same price or cheaper, which is kind of what everyone's been asking for. I don't know anyone who's been buying, you know a X670E motherboard and going, why can't I have 3 Gen 5 SSDs? Like, those are just starting to become reasonably priced. I think most people want one of those, and then what do you have room for? 2 or 4 Gen 4s? That's not enough for most people? I think most people just want that to become cheaper, so that's what I think AMD is gonna focus on. Um, Kenahoon25 writes in and asks, Tom, how much do you think Intel can charge for their 14th gen CPUs? I'm interested in them since I have a 13700K, but I'm not paying any more than 420 for that 14700K. I believe Intel has to price the i9, well, Core 9 at 580 and the Core 7 at 420 and I Core 5 at 300 to make anyone want it in this market, especially since you can get a 7950X for as low as $525. Yeah, and I think that's something that Intel's going to have to deal with here. Let me put down a timestamp on this 14th gen pricing. So look, I don't think this really costs any more to make than last gen. And I think Intel knows they're going to have to contend with $500 16 cores, $400 or less. I mean, it was like 350 at Micro Center with free RAM. So, $400 at most 12 cores and $400 8 cores with Vcache. And then, of course, $300 and less 8 cores. So, if Intel's going to compete with that, they're going to make their stuff 20% better. I'd suggest they should sell the Core 9 for 600, the Core 7 for 450, and the Core 5 for 350, Yeah, that's what I think. So I think keeping last gen prices or slightly less is what they're going to have to do. And I don't think they're going to want to do much less because their margins are in the complete dumpster right now. And if they have a 20% increase in performance, or even a 10% increase, that might be enough that they can at least hopefully keep their pricing with some level of margin. So, how much do I think Intel can charge? It's hard for me to say what I think they can charge because, frankly, people's priorities and what they're buying are just all over the place right now. Like, what is the 13900K selling for on Newegg? I think that's getting, yeah. So I don't know. I think as long as they can beat the i9 13900KS by 10 to 20%, I think 600 works. I do. And then for the i5, which the i7, which it's funny, the 7900X and the i7 13700K, which are really competitors, everyone just ignores those. But I always thought those were the best. Well, I don't really like the 7900X, but I always thought that i7 was the best from Intel's lineup. You get 8 big cores and 8 little cores. You probably don't want more than that many little cores anyways, unless you're gonna do HEDT stuff, which if you are, I don't know why you'd be buying this anyways. So that's 400 and they make it 20% better. So that would probably make it game as well as the current gen i9s. Yeah, I think they can get away with 450 for the i7 and 350 for the i5 probably, as long as it is 10 to 20% better than what they have now. I think they can probably get away with it. All right, let me see what other questions we have here. So W writes in and asks, let me put down a timestamp for this. M2 Apple M2. Um, do you think Apple has mastered GPU chiplets, iGPU, for example, with the M2 versus other GPU vendors? I mean, how do you define mastered? Uh, what they're doing works. What they're doing looks kind of similar to what I've heard Nvidia is considering doing with Blackwell, which is just really high speed connections for two of the same die, basically. Or just a chiplet, so not that complicated from what I saw. Like, let me just make sure I'm not speaking out of school here. Apple M2. Like, it's just, another iteration on the same design, right? Yeah, it's not crazy. Have they mastered GPU chiplets? No, not really. They just have their own way of doing it. And frankly, AMD's is more complicated and seems to be cheaper to implement, but it still needs work. So, no, I don't think they're ahead of AMD in GPU chiplets. I'd say they're actually slightly behind, but certainly ahead of, from what I can tell, Nvidia and Intel. Duh, 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 duh. Let's see, what other questions do we have here? Oh, here's another interesting one. Nvidia spinoff. I think I know what I'm going to say to this, but I haven't read it yet. Leo Tulowski writes in and he asks, would Jensen ever spin off its gaming division if its engineers couldn't make the best cards and they want because AI or whatever bubble takes priority? No, absolutely not. Jensen may prioritize AI. And first of all, they are right now because they have to. Like the crypto bubble, certainly especially the altcoins. Like, say what you will about Bitcoin, but the altcoins are really in the shitter right now. Um, you know, the altcoin mining is down. So Jensen has all of this capacity they bought up for Lovelace. Oh, perfect. We'll shift it to AI chips. So there you go. So he had to do that now. He had a financial responsibility to find some way to use this capacity he bought at TSMC. So that's going on now. But that doesn't mean he's done with gaming. And he's always, I think, going to want to have some of the best gaming chips out there. The worst case scenario for like priorities that I've heard from people at NVIDIA is maybe they'd stop making 600 millimeter squared dies and just make their top card a 300 to 400 and just, maybe that will just be called the 58, the 6080, the 7080, and they'll just make a mid-range chip, but it'll have, from NVIDIA's perspective, really good software. And then maybe there will be a Titan or something that's just like the worst yields of like some mega hopper next to next thing that really isn't efficient for gaming, but is the strongest gaming chip they make. But it costs $5,000. That's the future I see for NVIDIA, where they still have a $1,000 80 card, a $700 70 card, and a $400 60 card. And they just make a few dies and they call it a day. But they hope their software, their DLSS 4.0, is so good that you don't care. I think that's what Nvidia is going to do. I don't ever see them spinning off their gaming division, even if they, you know, put less emphasis on how important it is. Okay. So Cole Meyer writes in and asks, "Hey Tom, when are we going to see little cores on i3?" Let me put a timestamp there. Um, it's hard to. I mean, don't you already? Like, let me just look. I don't even know the name, but I'm just gonna start typing and hope Google fix i3-1315U. What's that? Let's see. Raptor Lake, 6 cores, 2 big cores, 4 little cores. They already have. Right? I was just guessing. It's called the i3. I'll put a link in the description. It won't appear in the description, of course, until I'm done recording and finish adding all the timestamps and stuff. But for those watching this in the future, yeah, I mean, we've already got the i3-1315U. It has 2 big cores, 4 little cores. So the only thing stopping them from, you know, launching some like 4+6 or 4+4, I guess it would probably be if I had to guess, i3 is they really don't have any low end competition from AMD down there, and they're just launching these to laptop right now. But Cole, they already make them. Non's Goofy Videos writes and says, "Would Nvidia be hit by the reticle limit soon?" No. I mean, look, let's talk about this reticle limit thing. That Nvidia has to worry about. Let me write down a timestamp for that. Like, so what is it? 2 nanometer is where there's like a 400 millimeter skirted reticle limit. Guys, we're on 4 nanometer now. Next year is going to be like a half 4, half 3 nanometer year. And then 3 nanometer is going to probably be dominant in 2025, besides some 2 nanometer products. So, what? Nvidia has a whole new generation coming late next year, from what I'm told, that's on 3 nanometer, Blackwell. And then after that, they'll have to worry about 2 nanometer. So they'll be working on that now. So they've got a couple generations to figure out what their plan of attack is. And I already have seen, I don't know if I've said this publicly, I guess I'll say it. I've already seen a design for a multi-chip NVIDIA thing. I just don't know that it's a gaming chip nor or if it will come to gaming. So NVIDIA is working on this, and it looks similar to what Apple's doing with their designs with chiplets, which is to say not that elaborate, but can get the job done if you want to make a really big thing. So I don't think do you call 2026 soon? I don't. So, no, they won't be hit by it soon, and they have enough time to launch something by then. That is chiplet. But by then, AMD will have way more elaborate designs. Well, it'll really become a question of, is AMD enough ahead in chiplets to have an advantage? Not, can NVIDIA use chiplets to some degree? Because of course they'll be able to. All right, let me see here. There are more tipped questions. Here they come. Wintao17 writes in and asks, "Hey Tom, greetings from Romania. Any idea if 14th gen or Zen 5 have improved memory controllers for 4 sticks? Any chance to get a laptop with 128 gigabytes of RAM?" Yeah, let me put that down as a new timestamp here. So next gen Zen 5, 14th gen RAM. So I hope listen to the last Broken Silicon. Already Phoenix technically supports up to 256 gigabytes of RAM. Like, let me pull that up right now. I'll put that in the description. 7940HS. I go here, and there will be a link in the description for future viewers. Obviously, not for people watching right now, but you can Google this 7940HS and pull up the full specs sheet. And if I look at max memory supported, 256 gigabytes. Now, does that mean that all laptop vendors are making it so their product can support that? No, but it's not Phoenix's fault. Phoenix supports up to 256 gigabytes of RAM, and that's an APU. It's up to the motherboard and laptop vendors at a certain point, Wintao, to do this. So if they can theoretically already do that now with an APU, yeah, next gen, if they want to, they can do more. It's just up to them if they want to. It really is. I think Strix Halo, though, is going to support a mountain of RAM on laptop, as I covered in the last Broken Silicon with the guest. Check that out. Good episode, I thought. The metrology engineer who does a lot of stuff with mega scanning and laptops in the field. And then when it comes to like desktop and stuff, because you did ask about laptops, I mean, Zen 5 is going to support a lot higher memory speeds, and 14th gen will be a bit better than Raptor Lake, but expect there to be some binning there where like the best chips support faster memory, but the lower end ones don't. But Arrow Lake will support faster memory. So like Arrow Lake versus Zen 5, yeah, you're gonna have 8,000 mega transfer support. From the AMD side, at least 7,200. I'd have to look at my last leak, but I've already seen them testing. I think they've got, if I remember correctly, 7,400 tested. I can probably just pull up my documents. Let me see. Is this said here? Yes. All right. Now I remember. So yeah. So they've already got 6,400 mega transfer DDR5 validated for Zen 5. And then they're working on 7,200 right now. So minimum 6,400, 99% chance 7,200, or I don't know, 99, but most likely 7,200. And that's just right now. Could get to 8,000 or something. So I wouldn't worry about RAM speeds for next gen. It seems like both companies are going to offer much faster memory than they do now. All right, let me see here. Jared Voss writes in and says, would it ever make sense for Intel to focus solely, I'm sorry, on being a silicon producer instead of trying to double dip into chip design as well? Let me put that here. Intel Fab first. Yeah, this is an interesting question that I keep getting. Would it ever, like, let's answer this, or ask and then answer this directly. Would it ever make sense for Intel to focus solely on being a silicon producer? Yes, if their company was a husk of its former self. And that's something people forget. That's not me saying that's going to happen. That's me saying, though, is there a scenario where that happens? Yeah, the scenario is if their design teams keep falling behind, Zen 5 overperforms, Zen 6 hits it out of the park, and then there's a post-Zen architecture that's another Zen moment, whereas Intel just has more delays. And let's say maybe I think Lion Cove and Arrow Lake's going to turn out well, but stuff after Lion Cove doesn't pan out. Yeah. I think Intel would focus on being a fab person first. Now, would they only do fabs? No, I think they're always going to design their own chips, but yeah, I think that's what would happen to them, because it sounds like they're close to competing with TSMC and fab capabilities. When I say close, not now, probably not next year, but maybe in 2025 or 26. And that'll get them some contracts eventually if they can keep it up. And yeah, that's the scenario where that happens. But that's not a scenario Intel's happy about. Everyone keeps saying, would Intel do this? Would Intel do that? Like, Intel's going to do whatever they need to stay alive. And if that means becoming a fab first company, that's what they'll do. But that's not a position they want to be in. And that's a long ways away from now, and many, many dark years ahead if that were to happen. So I think it's way too early to talk about that. Besides just saying, people who say Intel has to do this because of this, that's bullshit. If Intel needs to, they'll make AMD products, So, and I think people need to get over the idea that that would be impossible, because it's not. They're talking to both companies, guys, Nvidia and AMD. All right, let's see here. Johnny Boy writes in and asks, why does Intel only stick to 8P cores and not go to 10 or 12 for a flagship? I'm still on Z's 590, 11th gen Rocket League. Oof. No issues in gaming. When would you consider upgrading to a new platform? When you need more performance. I mean, you certainly don't have an efficient generation from Intel, but I mean, you have PCIe Gen 4 with Rocket Lake at least. And, if you have 8 or even just 6 cores with Zen 3 IPC, which is basically what Rocket Lake has, you have an inefficient Zen 3 chip with PCIe Gen 4. I don't know why, you know. You need more than that unless you're noticing issues. So when would you consider upgrading? Dude, don't until you need to. And otherwise, I think Arrow Lake's going to be a crazy one. I think Zen 5 is going to be bigger than Zen 4. It just depends when everything's going to be better, but Arrow Lake's probably going to be a crazy one, and so will Zen 6. But Zen 5's going to be another huge uplift. I just get the feeling like Arrow Lake, Panther Lake, and Zen 6 in 2025 is going to be the crazy one. So if you have no issues, if you could wait 2 years, I think that's when you're going to start seeing some truly crazy stuff. Although one could argue we're already seeing crazy stuff every year. Soup Wizard writes in and he says, chances of Intel and AMD partnering to support the same GPU AI to counter Nvidia. I don't think that's likely right now. I mean, they both might fund some open source stuff together every now and then, but I think Intel wants their own thing and AMD wants their own thing. And I don't know. I don't know what Intel should even do about that. To me, they seem very behind in AI. So we'll just leave that at that. Warfic writes in and asks, hello, Tom. What could we see with AMD PyTorch Hugface in the future? And what potential customers for MI300X? Well, any hyperscaler or person that wants a powerful AI chip with a less than 200 gigabytes of RAM. Microsoft or AWS are maybe a big one. Thank you. Look, AMD's AI play right now, very clearly. And let me put a timestamp here. AMD's AI play. So, you know, AMD's big play with AI right now is hyperscalers, and companies that frankly know what they're doing and are going to do a lot of it. Because if you're someone like Amazon, as long as AMD's making the best hardware, you'll write the software yourself. And I don't hear that AMD's software is bad. It's just not as noob friendly as Nvidia's, which is apparently very, 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 very easy to hit the ground running with. But if you're Amazon, you've got a bunch of engineers making $500,000 a year or more. They'll As long as the software is usable, you're gonna use the best hardware. And that's what AMD offers in terms of efficiency and all their little niche chiplets and stuff they can do. And with MI300, they can go to a customer like Amazon and say, how many cores do you want? How many AI chiplets do you want? Done. And then Amazon will take that and run with it and it'll be fine. And same with like Turin AI. Turin AI, that I've already leaked several things on recently, is interesting in that, do you want 16 cores, 64 cores? Do you want one, two, six AI chiplets? And then custom make this thing that doesn't need a PCIe card, that's more efficient than Intel by like a mile, and go. Just tell us what you want. What AI hamburger do you want in your SP5 server? That's what AMD's offering. And any customer that's looking at stuff that way, a lot of them are going to choose AMD, but they're not going to choose AMD for about a year. That's well, not about a year. They're choosing them now, but like a lot of the AI customers won't really want AMD until the end of this year, I should say. And that's just going to cost AMD an opportunity costs. But, it's something like I said in my last video. I stumbled upon this point that I think more people need to think about. So, a lot of the people hyping up Nvidia right now seem to believe AI is in this never-ending bubble that's going to go from 30 billion to 150 to 200 billion dollars in total addressable market over the next 5 years. Well, okay. If you actually believe the AI market's going to quadruple in the next 5 years, Nvidia's not going to take all of that. And a lot of the people saying Nvidia's got this market on lock are missing that AMD's got a lot of good hardware coming, some of it better than what Nvidia can offer in a lot of situations, while offering custom designs. And if you think this market's going to grow for 5 years straight, then you should make sure you take into account that AMD's got a lot of custom products Nvidia doesn't have for that market. They don't have it this year though. So if you're buying on hype, well, Nvidia's going to make a lot of money this year while AMD came to the market a little late. And so that's what I think. But that's the thing, though, is it's just a lot of people hyping up Nvidia seem to be hyping up AI. If you're hyping up AI, that means you think AI is going to be around for years. If you do, then you shouldn't miss AMD's opportunity here, because that means you think we have years for them to get into the market. But if you think this is going to be a boom and bust market, then definitely go for Nvidia, because Nvidia's got the perfect boom GPU that's easier to use now. So I don't know. That's just my thoughts about that. Um, and it's just Nvidia's better positioned right now. AMD might have better hardware in the very soon, but it's coming out a little late. And so I just think both of them have their own plays. And Nvidia's got the better play now, but AMD clearly has a good play in a year. Um, but yeah, that's what I think. Let me move on. Wooly Ram writes in and asks, have you heard anything about the 7700 and 7800 regular and XT versions? Yeah, I already opened up this video with a leak that quarter three is when Navi 32 comes out. They want to sell through Navi 21 and 22 first. Quarter three, guys. Quarter three. That is where you'll get what you can buy right now for the same price as what you can buy it for now, but it'll be more efficient with better ray tracing and maybe support new versions of FSR in the future. That's what you'll be waiting for. But if you don't need to buy something now, then don't buy something now. The RDNA 3 versions of what's out now will be more efficient, have better ray tracing, newer features. Get those in the future. Right now, though, if you want a 16 gigabyte card that can do 4K for $500, yeah, it's called the 6800 XT. It's already out. All right. So that's the tipped questions. I believe I'm caught up on those. Um, Let me pivot back to some of my patron questions. Well, some of you submit more tipped questions, and I just start accumulating those. So Intel come back. Oh, and also hit the like button, people. We got almost 800 people here. Let's get to 800 likes. All right. Benjamin Cannon writes in from the Patreon and asks, can Intel really come back in at least performance with Diamond Rapids? Yeah, I think it's plausible. Sapphire Rapids compared to Bergamo is horrific. Sure is. Bergamo has 40% more performance for 50 to 30% less cost at half the power and offers more PCIe lanes and RAM memory channels. Yep. I mean, what do you want me to say? For certain uses, Bergamo crushes Sapphire Rapids like it's a gen or two ahead. And then Genoa X crushes Sapphire Rapids at other tasks and Genoa at other tasks. So it's just a bad state right now. And then Emerald Rapids will be 20 to 30% better than Sapphire Rapids. But of course, that's not going to catch up to what AMD even has now. And then Granite Rapids should double Sapphire Rapids performance at least. But all right, so that maybe beats AMD's current gen by a little. And AMD will have Zen 5 out already. So I don't know. I think what we're seeing is right now Intel's behind, not quite as much as they were in the Zen 2, Zen 3 era, but they're still quite behind. And Emerald Rapids really isn't going to do anything to move the needle. And then Granite Rapids will kind of arguably catch up in some ways while costing more, but by then Zen 5 will be out. And so it's Diamond Rapids is the first time I can see until maybe catching up in server. And I think it's going to be really expensive, but I doubt Zen 6 is cheap as well. And so, your question, Benjamin, really was just, can they do it possibly? Yeah, they possibly can, but I think that means 2025 is when Intel maybe comes back, and it's going to be another long 2 years financially for the company, at least in server. Da, da, da. MT writes in and asks, hey, Tom, on Broken Silicon 207, your guest Adored TV made some rather negative remarks about the future of Intel. Do you share his opinion that Intel is in major trouble? Well, if you're going to ask the question that simplistically, yes, they're in trouble. Or do you think they are slowly righting the ship with upcoming products? Basically, do you think your guest was being a bit too dramatic about Intel's future? Oh, I think Jim's a little more pessimistic about Intel than I am. So to answer that question, well, he's definitely more pessimistic than I am. So there's no doubt about that. Sorry. You know, do I think Intel's slowly righting the ship? The way I can put it is I'm not ready to declare Intel back yet. I'm not going to go Intel's back because I was hoping I could say that by now, but they're not. They're not back. They're clearly not back. And Meteor Lake isn't going to make them back yet. They're more competitive than they were a year ago, but their financials have broken down far more than I expected them to. Sooner, like way sooner are their finances in rubble. So it's this weird thing where like, yes, Intel is slowly coming back to being more competitive with AMD, but I still see AMD as overall offering the more competitive products. Well, Intel's finances, even if they are becoming more competitive, their finances are way worse than I thought they would be at this point. So, I'm just not ready to say they're back. And unfortunately, I feel like every year I'm like, well, let's see how Alder Lake turns out. And that one turned out great. I thought they were back then. But then Raptor Lake turned out well performance wise, but didn't really hit AMD in pricing as much as I thought they would. And then we're still in this situation where I'm like, well, every year it just feels like I'm going, well, let's wait and see how good Arrow Lake is. And that's what I'm gonna say. But I do hear myself. Like I do hear every year. I'm like, let's wait for this Intel thing. I hear it. I know. I hear what I sound like. But I do think we need to wait and see how good Arrow Lake and Granite Rapids is before we can be sure. But I just don't see myself being ready to declare them truly back until Panther Lake. And it's not because they won't have wins. It's just because like having a win here and there while costing more isn't enough for me to declare them back. I mean, think about where Intel was. Alder Lake was like the only one I can think of recently that had a clear win. I mean, Alder Lake won gaming over Zen 3 by like what, 20% or something. And then they even won multi-threading. They were price competitive. They had Gen 5 PCIe support for the GPU slot. That was where I was like, hey, Alder Lake's better. And I recommended Intel that fall for that reason. Alder Lake's better. What do you want me to say? It's better than Zen 3. But then Zen 3 got cheaper. And it's kind of just been a back and forth with AMD having kind of, I think, the better overall product. And so I don't think Intel's going to have an Alder Lake moment again until Arrow Lake. And so we're just going to have to see if that's a bigger moment. And if it is, maybe I'll say they're back. All right. Enough on that. Let me pull up a question here. All right, I see an RDNA 3 question, but I want to answer one more of these patron questions before I get to this. Okay. Let's see. Terminal Junkie writes in and says, hypothetical question. If Intel went out of business tomorrow, so you mean bankrupt, not yet, like who would possibly buy them? ARM? No. Microsoft? I don't think so. Or Apple? What would drive them to buy them? IP or their fabs? Well, fabs would be the number one thing, I think. Obviously. Like, who would actually buy Intel? I don't know. Maybe Apple. But Apple uses ARM, so I don't think they need x86. I don't know, maybe Microsoft? I don't know. I don't know who really would. I don't think Intel's going to. I think what you'd have is a round of funding to turn Intel into a fab company. I don't really know that anyone would buy them. Maybe Apple, but they don't need the x86 license. I don't think Microsoft really wants it either. So I think you'd have a round of funding come together to prop up Intel to keep being a fab. Something like that almost happened with AMD. I was told directly that in 2014 through 16, when AMD's finances were in complete rubble, that Sony was coming together, possibly with Microsoft, and I forgot which other companies, to bail out AMD because they needed their chips for their APUs and consoles and other products as well. They weren't going to let AMD go bankrupt. So that's what would happen with Intel, but it would be different customers and it would be to prop up their fab business. So I don't think anyone would buy them outright. I think you just have like a ring of funding come out and prop them up. That's what I think would happen. All righty. Now, let me move on to this question here. Put down a new timestamp. While I'm doing that, let me remind everybody to hit the like button and click the links in the description to support Micro Center. Clicking on those links in the description helps Moore's Law is dead a lot. All right. Jan Benz writes in and asks, hi, Tom. Do you think AMD will go for the crown no matter what with RDNA 4? In the past, it seems like AMD chose not to compete for the crown. That's not really true this time. They wanted to go for the crown with RDNA 3, just didn't pan out as well as RDNA 2 did. Um, Even if they had a high-end competitor, they chose for various reasons to back out. No, they didn't. That's AMD trying to save face. That's bullshit. Will RDNA 4 be different? That's too soon to say. RDNA 4 is, I think a little over a year away. So, will RDNA 4 be different? I can't say. What I've heard is that it's more complicated and it kind of, and I mean this in a good way. I mean this in a good way. It sounds like RDNA 3 again, where they're trying to get it all right and it's complicated, but if they hit a home run, they don't think Nvidia can really compete with it. If they don't, they'll probably have another 50% performance increase at least, which is nothing to sneeze at, by the way. But that's really all I can report about it. Is it's just too soon to say. But the idea that they didn't want to win this year is, or this gen, is bullshit. They definitely don't buy that. They wanted to win with RDNA 3. They just didn't. And with RDNA 4, they want to win again, but it's too soon for me to say. And I hear Blackwell's pretty damn good, so I'm not going to place any bets yet. All righty here. Okay, let me get back to some of the tipped questions here. And remember, Patreon questions. Keep sending in those tips. Okay, what else do we have here? Framework. Okay. So Zenoin writes in and asks, considering Framework Laptop's new design with a removable GPU and finally supporting both AMD and Intel processors, do you think we will see further designs that incorporate more high-end APUs? Especially since Intel hasn't done so well recently in the integrated graphics department, do you think they'll have a good alternative choice for AMD's laptops? Well, Meteor Lake will offer at least Phoenix performance, if not a little better. So yeah, if you consider that an alternative, there you go. Strix will be stronger than Phoenix though. And I'm sure they'll be able to upgrade that into the Framework laptop. Do I think they'll have more high-end ones? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I looked at the Framework laptops and they are cool, don't get me wrong. But I will say for how much they cost, it's like, let me pull it up. I kind of broke it down and it was not quite what I wanted. So if I go to AMD, right. So it is $1,050. It comes with a like 7840U, 780M integrated graphics. And then you've got to start configuring it from there. Now, if I go to configure it, right. If I go to configure it, I have to decide between several expansion cards. And it's like, right. So do I want extra storage? Do I want extra USB slots? And they only have 4 expansion slots. I don't want an expansion slot with 1 USB-A port. I want one with 2. I want 2 USB-A, 2 USB-C, and then a ton of display outs. And it's cool that they let you customize it, but I like a lot of USB ports on my laptop because I sometimes use them as little workstations on the go for this channel. So it's one of those things where it's like, I think it's cool. And I think it probably has enough expansion slots for most people, but I don't, no, I want it all. I want Ethernet and expansion slots and all, I really wish we'd have like 6 expansion slots and some of those expansion slots to offer a couple USB ports, not just one. So that's my issue with it. Um, but I tell you what, if they let you upgrade from a Phoenix APU to a Strix Halo next year, yeah, I could see myself going for it then because I'm going to tell you, or a Strix Point, I'm just going to want Strix Point or Halo with a ton of RAM, and that's it next year. Like, that's what I want. I don't need more performance on my laptop. I want the laptop to last 30 hours. I don't want these 8-hour, can't even game on the go, crap configurations. All right, let me see here. Bacon House Collective writes in, and he has a very thoughtful question that I'm actually kind of excited about finally getting to. So, defining GPU value. Let me check the time because I do have a die shrink to record later today. Remember that too, everybody, that if you support Moore's Law is Dead on Patreon, you get exclusive videos and podcasts ad free. And yeah, one of them is coming up tomorrow. So we'll be recording that tonight. Anyways, Bacon House Collective asks, Tom, if you were tasked with developing a 3-digit numerical GPU and or CPU comparison metric, what would you start as your concept? The ultimate goal being cutting through the minutia and saying GPU X is better than Y in true performance per dollar. This question is rooted in the idea that we might see prolonged stratification of component costs, i.e., Nvidia's top two products in a pricing tier of their own, then high, mid, and lower tiers from there, thus making Halo products for each chipmaker not really comparable in performance or cost anymore. So a three, it's hard to say because guys, it just always comes down to what else is out on the market, and that is never going to change. Like for example, if we had a way of if we tried to come up with some like objective metric for like why a console is this amount of good, you would might look at previous generations and go, well, the PS3 and 360 were like 30 times better than the previous gen, and the PS2 was whatever percent better than this. Then you said, well, so every console generation should at least be 10 to 20 times better than the previous gen or something, you know. But then you also have to consider, well, yeah, but look at the competition. Look at the pricing. So the PS4 was cheaper than the PS3, and its main competition was only 6 times stronger than the 360, which was a pretty paltry increase. So it made Sony's 8 to 12 times increase look really damn good for the PS4. And so if we're looking at GPUs, you know, if you compare like the 6970 to the 7970, the 7970, especially when drivers matured, brought like a 50 to 100% performance increase over the 6970, but it costs 50% more. So they're charging 50% more for something that's almost twice as good. Okay, well, that sounds okay. But then you look at the 290X. 290X was only 50% better than the 7970. Right, but it actually cost the same as the previous gen. So I don't know that there's ever a way to really quantify when a generation is so much better. It's just always going to have to be kind of a judgment call. Otherwise, if we're trying to confirm or compare which GPU is better than which GPU, that's still a little hard to do quantifiably, even relative to two GPUs, because you'd go, all right, well, this one's 20% stronger, so it should cost 20% more. Should it? Do they have the same amount of RAM? Right. If you have two GPUs that have 8 gigabytes of RAM, like, I don't think it's okay if one's just 20% more, 20% more cost, because 8 gigabytes is going to be a huge bottleneck. But then let's say you have two 32 gigabyte GPUs. Yeah, they're both more than enough RAM. So at that point, you might want as much performance as possible. So I don't really think there's ever a way to perfectly qualify how much is what. The only thing I would say is we cannot forget that there's more than a couple of categories. There's price performance, there's efficiency, there's features, and then, there's, if you're in CPU, you'd probably go with like how well it does like future things or something. And in GPU, I don't know, maybe ray tracing would be its own thing, but you can never forget that those are all there, and that, sometimes having more RAM than other times is way more important. And sometimes, if you have two cards that are crazy powerful, but one of them has like, way more RAM than needed. Yeah, the other one might be stronger, but at a certain point, it's like this one's going to do everything you need it to do. So I'm starting to ramble a little bit here, but I don't know. All I would say is for all these comparisons, I don't think we can ever have a perfect system that lasts longer than one generation because the tables turn every generation. But I do think we just have to always remind people not to forget everything that goes into what makes a good product. All right, enough rambling on that one. Chris Rich writes in and says, let me see here. Well, yeah, yeah. Well, let's do this one first. AI hype. Okay. Remember to get on those tipped questions. Probably only going to do this for another 15 to 20 minutes. So if you want to get any final questions, put them in now. And maybe start queuing up those questions in the Moore's Law is Dead Discord as well if you are a patron. Remember, if you are a patron, you can just submit questions for free. So, join the Patreon. That allows us to have a much more stable income for the channel to pay me, Dan Gerard, Jean Philippe, and sometimes Carbon Cry. And, we have a whole team here that's being provided for. Let me put a timestamp. Okay. So, Chris Rich writes in, and I guess I'll put green lights for this. The IT market sure is fond of hype cycles. What's your overall take on the current AI craze? I'd like to point out that Apple has been including AI hardware in their products for many years, and I wouldn't say that really changed all that much for most people so far. Personally, I expect that a lot of first generation products will fail, but maybe 5 years from now, we'll start to see it make tangible difference. Well, all right. So, the way I'm going to answer this question, Chris, yeah, the way I'm going to answer this question is when it comes to I see it this way. Um, at least with how Nvidia is selling their products, we're in a total hype cycle. I think what you have is just dozens of companies and people and researchers going, we need to do AI. Blah. And so what they're doing is just buying what they can. And what they can buy is A100 and H100, and Nvidia's profiting off it. So we're really in the let's see what we can do with this phase. And Nvidia's products are the easiest to tinker around with, and they're ready to ship them in bulk. So that's where Nvidia is benefiting. You know, in terms of how things will change in the future, well, I think it's going to be no different than the dot-com bust. You're going to have some products that stay forever. You're going to have some products that we're going to go, yeah, I don't actually think AI is doing this that well. So I've been talking to a lot of people about what AI is, good for, what jobs are already being replaced. So I have a lot of contacts in Silicon Valley, and it seems like for sure the assistant, like secretary use for AI is here to stay. I think that one's going to be pretty disruptive, personally. This is all opinion though. And I think a lot of the AI art stuff is going to be a mixed bag. I think if you, well, I think actually there's two ways to look at the AI art thing. I think there's going to be some companies with uncreative management that say this AI is making art just as good as people. Well, those are going to be some of those are going to be people that don't have a creative bone in their body and can't tell the difference between shit and quality. And they're going to go, this is good. I mean, you see this with movies all the time. Think about the young adult novel boom. You had like the Hunger Games, and you could argue Harry Potter was kind of the start of that as well. Um, and those movies were good and did well, and those book series sold well. And they're like, we're gonna have 10 other film series about 19-year-olds running around in concrete mazes or whatever the hell those other young adult those young adult movies were. And yeah, they're gonna do shit and they're not gonna make any money. And you're gonna see a lot of the people that finance those movies said, we have hot people surrounded by concrete in a dystopian future. That's the same as the Hunger Games, right? No, it's not. And I think there's a lot of this AI art stuff where some of it can replace some of the work people were doing for sure, but some of it there's uncreative people saying this looks the same, but they can't tell good from bad. And then they're going to make these decisions that long term don't pan out. And it's the same thing that happened with the dot-com bust. It's the same thing that happened with blockchain. It's like, yeah, you still have people in Venezuela, El Salvador, and a bunch of countries using Bitcoin because they have no other alternative. And then, you have other companies making just, well, I don't want to say what type of apes they're making, but no one's buying art on the blockchain, guys, long term. So, and those companies will fall apart. And so I think what you'll see is a lot of people buy a ton of AI hardware right now, and some of it will pan out, and some of it, these companies will go, we just spent $1 billion to make worse stuff. Which ones? The people that are, if I was 100% sure on which companies were going to, I shouldn't even say do well. I should say are undervalued, then I just go buy those companies, or put money into those companies, I should say. And I think there's a lot of people that are acting overconfident in what's going to pan out. As they say, self-driving is 2 years away for the past 10 years, and it's just not there. So I think you just got to be careful because I do think there's going to be some companies that overinvest in this stuff and they're going to go, we didn't really need to invest in this. But there's some companies that are already just making some jobs obsolete right now. I just don't think it's going to be as many jobs as people thought. And I think long term, a lot of those jobs that were made obsolete, there's going to be new jobs working with your hands on manufacturing floors or something. More of that actually. So that's what I think. But that's always what happens with these boom and bust cycles. All right. All right. So we got a question here from Camaro SSDs. And he asks, can I bring my Gen 3 SSD or SATA SSD to a new system as a boot drive only and buy a Gen 5 SSD just for games? Yeah, I mean, you can. Just remember that you should be able to clone your OS to a Gen 5 as long as it's the same capacity. And then you can just use the Gen 3 for other stuff as well. Because I'd want to put my OS on the latest SSD. But there's certainly an argument that it might not matter. And if you just want to put a Gen 5 in there, go for it. But I would try to make the OS run on your fastest drive. And frankly, you can clone drives now pretty reliably. I even saw these things on Amazon where you have, hardware cloning. Like there's no software. It's a thing. You put an SSD in this slot, an SSD in this slot, and it hard clones it. No issues. Look for that. If you're that worried, that should just do a one-to-one, clone. If you're worried about issues, software cloning. Um, Eric Weinberg writes in and he asks, great reporting these last couple weeks. Well, thank you. I was technically on vacation one of the weeks, but I worked overtime the week before to have 3 content drops last week while I was on vacation. So I'm glad you liked it. That's true too. Christmas Crustacean writes in and says you can also clone it to a larger drive and then extend the partition. That's also true. So you can take a Gen 3 500 gigabyte SSD and then you can hardware clone it to a 2 terabyte Gen 5. And then in Windows, disk manager, you can then extend the partition and fill it out. I've done that before. Or what I'll do is I used to use one SSD with multiple drive letters, one for Moore's Law is Dead, one for games, and then I added a new SSD and I just copied that over my games over from a Steam library to this one. I just extended the partition on another one. So don't forget you can do that as well. Um, duh, 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 duh. All righty. I think I got another tipped question here. No. Okay, let me go. So I like this question as well. AMD segmentation N32. So Mr. Sideburns writes in from the Moore's Law is Dead Discord, which again you get access to if you support us on Patreon. And he asks, is AMD going to shoot themselves in the foot again when segmenting Navi 32? Are they going to have the 7800 XT as full Navi 32 with little to no gen over gen uplift? I think the 7800 XT makes more sense to use Navi 31, especially because I've heard AMD has a lot of leftover yields of Navi 31 that doesn't validate as Navi as a 7900 XTX. It's not to say these are, worse than Navi or than a 7900 XT yields. It's just they might have a lot of the least efficient yields of the 7900 XT and they may go, yeah, I don't know. It seems like people don't want to pay an $800. So let's just, take the worst, most inefficient yields of the 7800 XT or the 7900 XT. Sorry, these names are confusing me. The 7900 XT yields, the worst yields of them, disable it a little more, give it 16 gigabyte of RAM, call that a 7800 XT. And what that would do is allow them to siphon imperfect yields of Navi 31 to where the market wants it. They're not really giving up that much. They're using less MCDs, hopefully, anyways, if they make a 16 gigabyte Navi 31. So they'd be saving some silicon money. So, yeah, I think what you would see then is that you'd see them go, okay, well, we're going to launch a more disabled version of 31. And then if that sells better, we'll just siphon yield to that and save money on RAM. That I think makes a lot more sense than going with Navi 32 for the 7800 XT. I could see them go with Navi 32 for a 7800 though. That I guess I would say that. What I would see AMD considering doing is launching a Navi launching a Navi 32 RX 7800 non-XT for like $600, and then maybe they never launch a 7800 XT. Actually, that kind of makes sense to me. Or 550 because what? The 7600 has the same amount, I believe, of compute units as the right? Yeah, it's the same amount of compute units, I believe, as the 6600. Yeah, it's 30% better. And yeah, that's about par for the course. So yeah, they could launch something with full Navi 32, then probably, even though it has the same amount of compute units as a 6800, they could probably launch something at least 20%, 30% better than that, which would put it between a 6800 XT and 6900 XT. And yeah, that would work. So I almost wonder if that's what AMD will do then. I think either if 7900 XT sales don't pick up enough, I think they'll launch a 7800 XT with Navi 31 for 650 or 600. And if they do pick up, then they'll go, okay, well, we're not going to launch a 7800 XT. We're going to launch a 7800 with Navi 32 for like 550. And it'll be like just replacing the 6800 XT. It'll be 550, but the same price as the 6800 XT is now, but it'll be slightly stronger, better ray tracing, less power consumption. That's what I think. Um, Let me double check something here since that alarm went off. I do have a couple more tipped questions though. Um, Let me just ask Dan when he's ready to record the die shrink. So I'm not holding him up here. All righty. And again, that means I'm almost done though. So if you have any questions, make sure you get them in now. Camaro85 writes in and asks, no, I mean using direct storage in upcoming games. Can I use a Gen 3 for Windows and buy one Gen 5 for games? Guys, that doesn't that doesn't change my answer at all. You know, you said, can I use a Gen 5 SSD with direct storage? Yeah, you probably can, but it's always going to be better if it's on the OS drive. It doesn't change my answer at all. You know, I would still make it the OS drive because there's a lot of things that go into performance outside of direct storage and like running the OS anyways. Mexi Man and Cheese writes in and asks, any information on how the ROG Ally sales went? I haven't been following that at all. Granted, I've basically been on vacation since it launched, but I haven't followed that at all. Um, I don't know anyone who's tracking it. I imagine I'll get some uh whispers of it from at least one of my sources I can think of at some point, but sales. But I don't like it's now on sale for 700. Where do I buy this? It's at Best Buy. It's in stock. ROG Ally is in stock. Okay. Steam Deck. It's funny how they always have to put trademark at the end of Steam Deck. Boop. And that's in stock as well. So I don't know. And that's all relative, but I don't know. I oh gee, but that's not going to be here, right? I don't know. To me, it seems like there's no evidence it's selling incredibly well. That's what I would say. And I'll just leave it at that. I don't see the evidence it's selling incredibly well. Brandon Evans writes, and let me put a new timestamp there. Brandon Evans writes in, any thoughts on Tunnel Falls shipping to research labs, claiming a 95% yield on a 300 millimeter wafer using EUV? Well, this is a thing I don't know about. Tunnel Labs, UV, 95% yield. Um, oh, this is an Intel related thing. You know what? Honestly, guys, until this is just one of those things where it's like until we have a product, why would I have a thought on this? You can claim whatever yields you want. You can say things are ramping however you want, but until there's a product, no comment. Because a lot of these companies claim a lot of things, but it's like, okay, you got this many yields for what? Is it a product anyone's actually buying yet? No. Okay, well then I have nothing to say. You know, Intel's fabs, I hear, are doing well. That's not the bottleneck right now compared to the rest of their products. Are they caught up to TSMC yet? Nope. Probably be a couple more years, but that's all I would say. Mukesh McKenzie writes in, thanks for the coverage, Tom. OG 8,000 subscriber. So right after I hit 7,970 subscribers and had a little party, that is quite a while ago. Thank you for the tip. Um, Let me see here. All right. Well, let me see. I think I have one more Patreon question here. It's an Xbox related one. Um, Alexander writes in from the Patreon and asks, "Were you interested in at all in the Starfield demo? It's Bethesda, so of course it's going to be buggy until the community patches it for them, but it looks pretty dang exciting to me. The scale and detail of the game appear to perhaps set a new standard in open world games." Um, when it comes to Starfield, the only things I've noticed in the headlines are it runs at 30 frames per second and below 1440p on Xbox Series X, and so oofta. What is it going to be, a 720p game on Series S? I don't know. I don't really have a lot to say about it. It looks very buggy, but until we see what the game actually plays like, who knows whatever is worth it. Um, it's funny when I see that it runs at 30 frames per second. My guess it's not because of the resolution. Um, my Someone in the comments says they said it was an artistic choice. Bullshit. Um, I think they chose 30 frames per second because of their CPU issues. I remember Fallout 4, and it wasn't until I got like a Zen CPU, and a fast one, that game was running stably at like 100 frames. I remember that one flying ship in Boston Harbor or something in Fallout 4. And I remember calling Dan over and going, watch this. And I looked over one side of the ship, 90 frames a second. I believe this was on an i7, 6700K. And then I looked on the other side of the ship, 70 frames. And I was like, what? Why am I getting like almost half the frame rate? Just if you were to look at the camera, there was no difference in complexity. It's just this side got half the frame rate. So my guess is they had the game in some areas running at 60, and then other games it drops to 25 frames or something, and that's why they're locking it to 30. I would still suggest they should have gone out of their way to lock it to 40 frames with variable refresh rate, because I've tried it. 40 feels so much better than 30. But I don't know. I guess that's what they're doing. Uh, and someone says it's not. I saw Digital Foundry said it was running below 1300p. Remember, 1440p is less than half the resolution of 4K. So this thing's running almost, I don't want, it's not halfway, but it's like almost to 1080p 30. That's pretty bad. Um, and Bethesda games love RAM, and I wonder if this Series X's segmented memory is just blowing that game apart. But we'll see it. We won't know until it's on PC as well to compare it. So besides that, I don't have a whole lot to say. Let me see the games. I don't want to see a demo. I want the game to actually come out. And that's really all I have to say about the showcase. I don't really have a need to follow that showcase though. I mostly game on PC, so I'm just gonna get the game on PC anyways. Um, and like, did they? Let me look this up. Hellblade 2 release date 2024. I thought this was going to be a fucking launch game. This is why I'm not paying attention to the Xbox showcase. Their launch trailer game, Hellblade 2, is coming out in 2024. Who cares? Who know? What if it gets delayed again? None of these games are ever coming out from Xbox, it feels like. If they are, it's at 30 frames per second and 1080p, apparently. So, no, I'll pay attention to the Xbox games when they actually release one of them, So, Otherwise, it's just such a malaise of like not caring because nothing ever seems to come out. Um, let me see here. Yeah. So, all right. I think this is going to be a final call for reader mails here. I got through all the Patreon questions. Duh, duh, duh. Okay. Did anything left from the Patreon or the live chat? How long have we been going for? Going for an hour and a half. That's long enough. On NHL on BC. Yeah, that's one of those weird series, Oystein, where they just don't bring some games to PC. Uh, well, I see someone typing in the Patreon. Let's see if that's one last question. You've got 5 seconds. H433X0X on. If I just stare at the camera in a creepy way. All right. That is it. You didn't finish typing. I've got to go record a podcast with Dan. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for for watching and listening to this one. If you enjoyed it, please make sure you like it, share it. New leaks about the 5600X 3D, Core 9 14900K, and Navi 32 in this one. If you joined halfway, start it over. Don't miss those new leaks. Share it on Reddit with people. That there are new leaks here that really help so much. I'm back from vacation, working harder than ever. If you support Moore's Law on Patreon, you're gonna get a new ad-free episode of Die Shrink. It's video now with timestamps next week. So support Moore's Law on Patreon for just $2 a month to get that. And otherwise, there's other tiers up there for supporting other things as well. And yep, click the links in the description, the like button, share. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.